So if you want to like absolutely guarantee a life of just quiet resentment, there is a very simple, almost foolproof formula.
Oh, yeah. What's the formula?
You rely entirely on your brain to manufacture your happiness.
Right. Yeah. Just logic your way into joy. Good luck with that.
Exactly. I mean, it doesn't work. And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're pulling from this really fascinating stack of sources. We've got transcripts of a college lecture, some biographical notes, and 2 deeply analytical poems.
It's a great mix of material.
It really is. And our mission for you today is to uncover the true architecture of happiness and love. And you know, what you're going to discover, this guy blew my mind, is that this architecture is not built from massive, heavy stones or these grand, sweeping blueprints engineered by logic.
Right, the brain stuff.
Yeah, the brain stuff. It is actually constructed from something entirely different. Teeny tiny details.
Which, I mean, that fundamentally challenges the default way most of us operate, right?
Oh, tell me.
Because we spend like an enormous amount of cognitive energy just waiting for or trying to plan out these monumental, life-altering gestures, we assume the big moments are what define a joyful existence.
Like the grand romantic movie moment.
Exactly. While completely ignoring the actual minute materials that sustain it day to day.
And the narrative context we have for this deep dive, it provides a pretty stark, pretty dramatic backdrop for that realization. Our sources center around Professor Erasmus Cromwell-Smith. He's a 62-year-old poetry professor. And based on the biographical notes, he recently faced this devastating, incredibly aggressive brain tumor.
Yeah, the kind of terminal prognosis that usually just means, you know, the story is over.
Right. It's a grim reality.
Right.
But then there's this unexpected bend in the road, an unforeseen physical gift, really. He goes into remission.
It's just an incredible shift. I mean, he's suddenly granted a reprieve from this terrifying, dark road.
Yeah. So picture this scene. He returns to his college campus. He's riding his old bicycle, and he walks into this packed auditorium of his students. They give him a standing ovation.
I can only imagine the emotion in that room.
Right. But what is so compelling about this lecture transcript is that he doesn't stand up there and talk about medical miracles or like the clinical realities of his remission.
No, he goes in a totally different direction.
He does. Having just faced his own mortality, he decides to deliver this intellectual lightning bolt epiphany. He teaches a masterclass on what it truly feels like to be blissful.
And he uses these 2 profound poems from his past to do it, to expose the hidden treasures buried in the mundane aspects of our daily lives.
Exactly. So to understand how to achieve this newly promised bliss, we first have to kind of understand the internal battleground of human decision-making.
Which he explains through the first poem, The Better Instincts of Our Hearts.
Yeah. And the context here brings us back to his own Harvard days in the 1970s and his mentor, this woman named Mrs. V.
Right, because young Erasmus was apparently paralyzed by fear. He was completely infatuated with someone, but just terrified to act on it.
We've all been there.
Oh, for sure. And Mrs. V uses that moment to point out a central, really tragic paradox of the human condition.
The paradox being that humans possess great instincts of both the mind and the heart, but we almost always choose to follow the instincts where we are the absolute weakest.
Yeah, because the weakest instincts are usually the safest ones, right? They are the ones driven by, like, self-preservation and ego protection.
Okay, let's unpack this because the poem makes a really striking claim about this dynamic. It specifically states that in matters of love, the brain and the heart are like oil and water.
They just fundamentally do not mix.
Right. The author argues that the brain simply cannot create, govern, or sustain love. And if you try to rely on your brain for love, you don't get feelings, you just get thoughts.
Yeah, it becomes an intellectual exercise.
Exactly. You end up settling for an arrangement of comfort and emptiness.
What's fascinating here is the mechanism behind that failure. Like, why does the brain fail so spectacularly at love? It comes down to the brain functioning as a calculating machine.
Right. Constantly assessing risk.
Exactly. Its primary evolutionary job is to seek safety, to find logic, and to secure a return on investment. But love, by its very nature, offers no guaranteed return on investment.
It's all risk.
It's pure vulnerability. So when the brain tries to process love, it negotiates. It creates a transactional arrangement. It says, you know, I will provide X if you provide Y, and we will both be perfectly comfortable.
But comfort is not bliss.
No, not at all. The poem argues that true acts of valor, the monumental steps where someone would literally take a bullet for another person, where heroes are born and history actually changes, those only occur when the heart bypasses the brain's risk assessment entirely.
Wow.
Yeah, that suspension of self-interest is what elevates humanity to its, what the poem calls its luminous heights.
But, I mean, push back on that a little bit. There's a glaring vulnerability in relying purely on the heart's passion. If the brain is utterly useless in matters of the heart, aren't we just flying blind? Because, if I can use an analogy here, I get that trying to spreadsheet your way into a relationship is going to feel completely hollow. But doesn't the brain at least keep the car on the road? Like, you still need it so you don't drive off a cliff of impulsive mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. And the text actually anticipates that exact defense. It doesn't claim the brain is useless in life overall. The brain serves us incredibly well for logic, for convenience, for common sense. To use your analogy, you absolutely need the brain to steer the car and maintain the engine.
Right.
But the core truth the professor is getting at is that absolute wholesome happiness cannot be calculated. Keeping the car on the road is surviving. Reaching those luminous heights is thriving. The brain negotiates the terms of our survival, but the heart commits to the meaning of it. You can only reach a state of bliss by occasionally abandoning the calculated consequences.
Just letting the heart's instincts completely take the lead.
Precisely.
Which introduces a massive practical problem, and it's one the professor immediately pivots to in the lecture.
Yeah, how do you sustain it?
Right. If the heart is abandoning calculation to reach these heights, how does it not just burn out? Because pure passion is exhausting. How do we actually express and sustain that love day to day without systemic collapse?
And that friction leads directly into the second poem he shares, which is titled Life is Bliss.
Yeah.
This is where Mrs. V's wisdom really provides a sustainable blueprint. She explains that love is not a monolithic, singular event. We culturally obsess over these grand, sweeping declarations.
Oh, the boombox outside the window.
Exactly. But she says love is actually something that must be captured, preserved, and made through continuous, minute exchanges.
The teeny tiny details.
Yes, the teeny tiny details. The poem breaks down the transformative power of these small gestures, making a critical distinction here. These are not expected binary norms.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when we talk about binary norms, we're talking about like remembering an anniversary or taking out the trash because it's your turn.
Right, those are just obligations.
Yeah, the brain categorizes those events as maintaining the baseline status quo. If you do them, you avoid a fight. If you don't, you get in trouble. But the text explicitly states that the details that actually build bliss are spontaneous. They are unexpected.
And importantly, they usually hold zero material value. It's a note left in a pocket, a single flower on a pillow, just a reassuring smile across a crowded room.
Yeah.
The psychological mechanism at play here is the contrast effect. Because these gestures are unprompted and unrequired, they register to the recipient as a pure, uncalculated surplus of emotional safety. The poem actually describes the reaction to this kind of joy as deeply visceral-like emotions bundling up in a knot in your throat, making it hard to breathe.
But a random detail on its own isn't quite enough. Or I'm going to use another analogy here, because I think of love like a mosaic.
Okay, I like that.
A single tiny detail is just a colored stone, but empathy is the mortar. Without empathy as the catalyst, you're just throwing rocks at someone.
Wow, that's a perfect way to put it.
But with it, you build a masterpiece. Like if I randomly leave a spark plug on my partner's pillow, it's unexpected, sure, but it's not going to cause bliss unless they are a mechanic.
Exactly. Without empathy, a gesture is just random data. Empathy is the signal that gives the data actual meaning. Mrs. V calls love the ultimate empathy.
Yeah.
And why does it transform the mundane into the magical? Because true empathy requires a massive shift in cognitive load. You have to temporarily bypass your own ego, step entirely outside of yourself, and genuinely observe the other person.
You have to pay enough attention to their internal world to know what tiny detail will actually resonate with them in that specific moment.
Exactly. And when you combine a spontaneous detail with that level of profound empathy, you are communicating something incredibly powerful. You're saying, I see you, I know you, you are the center of my universe right now, and absolutely nothing obligated me to prove that to you other than my own desire to do so.
It's completely selfless.
Right. And the professor asserts that true bliss happens when we are just completely taken by surprise by someone else's selfless attention to us.
That reaction when someone, like, hides their face behind their hands because they are just so overcome by the simple realization of, oh my God, they love me. That is the architecture, built stone by stone, glued together by the signal of empathy.
It demands an active daily engagement. It's not passive.
Right.
It's genial creativity applied to the person you love.
But bringing this back to the lecture-hall transcript, the students listening to Professor Cromwell-Smith, they're smart. They are naturally looking for the flaws in this theory.
Of course they are.
Because empathy and spontaneous notes, they're wonderful on a lazy Sunday. But life is heavy. We have mortgages, career pressures, real-world adversity. And during the Q&A segment, a student named Sarah brings up this exact vulnerability.
It's such a great question.
She asked how we balance following our hearts with the practical demands of life.
And the professor responds with what he calls the harmony formula. He states that the heart provides the purpose, while the mind provides the path.
So what does this all mean for you practically? If the heart sets the destination, but the mind draws the map, is it a collaboration? Or is the mind just sort of the heart's administrative assistant?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a vital partnership that perfectly resolves that oil and water conflict from the first poem.
Oh, right.
Remember, the mind and heart don't mix in the creation of love, but in the execution of a life, they absolutely must collaborate. Without the mind's path, the heart's purpose is just an unsustainable dream.
It just fizzles out.
Exactly. Your heart dictates your deepest truths, who you love, what brings you passion. But your mind's executive function, your logic, your practicality that navigates the real-world obstacles.
So the mind figures out how to pay the bills and manage the schedule.
Yes. Specifically so that the heart has a secure, protected space to express itself.
So the mind builds the fortress so the heart can safely be vulnerable inside of it.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Practicality ensures that our deepest truths can be acted upon sustainably.
Which leads to a really profound question from another student, Louis.
Yeah, Louis's question hits hard.
He asks why the poem Life is Bliss claims that these small details have their greatest worth when times are hardest. And, we have to pause and remember the physical state of the professor standing in front of them right now.
Right. He has a shaved head. He looks exhausted.
He has just emerged from the shadow of an aggressive, incurable prognosis. He intimately knows the crushing weight of hardship.
And his response to Louis, it strips away all the romanticized fluff. He explains that when we are poorer, when we are in sickness, when things are at their absolute worst, our usual resources are entirely depleted.
Right.
We don't have the energy, the money, or the status to engineer grand gestures, or even to fix the overarching problem. We are pushed into a state of severe scarcity.
And in those moments of crisis, the human default is to just revert to purely transactional survival. The mind takes over, frantically navigating the doctors, the financial ruin, the logistics of the emergency.
Exactly. And amidst that frantic survival state, a tiny gesture of empathy becomes an absolute lifeline. Because giving, when you have plenty of resources, is easy.
Yeah, it costs you nothing.
Right. But offering a teeny tiny detail of love when you were depleted, when you were suffering alongside the person you love, that is the ultimate sacrifice of your remaining cognitive and emotional bandwidth.
Because it breaks the transactional nature of the crisis. When you are sitting in the dark, overwhelmed by a problem you cannot solve, and someone offers you a small, unexpected detail born purely of empathy, it proves that you are still a human being to them.
Not just a situation to be managed.
Exactly. It restores our shared humanity. The mind is mapping the path to survive the hardship, but the heart's tiny details provide the actual reason to survive.
It completely reframes how we allocate our energy. It shifts the focus from the macro to the micro. The overarching message here is that we do not need to wait for a heroic, history-altering moment to be a hero to someone we love.
Right.
We have the capacity to alter their history on a random Tuesday morning through a singular, observant act of empathy.
It's so powerful. So to bring this deep dive into a cohesive close for you, what these sources reveal is that a well-informed, blissful life is rarely the result of grand, sweeping victories engineered by the calculations of our brain.
No, not at all.
The true architecture of a fulfilled life is constructed block by block. It relies on profound empathy, spontaneous, tiny gestures, and the courage to trust the better, sometimes entirely illogical instincts of our hearts.
It requires a state of constant wakefulness, really. You have to be present enough to notice the opportunities to provide those details, and humble enough to absorb them when you are on the receiving end.
I want to leave you with Professor Cromwell-Smith's parting declaration to his students. standing there as a man who had literally just looked mortality in the eye and returned. He tells them that life's true beauty often lies in the smallest details.
And with this really enthusiastic promise, he tells the class that their journey into this architecture will dive even deeper in the next session.
It's a compelling cliffhanger, leaving the students and us with a mandate to look closer at the mundane. So we want to extend that mandate to you.
Try it out.
Yeah, test this architecture yourself today. Don't wait for a grand occasion. Look for one completely mundane moment where you can provide a spontaneous, teeny tiny detail for someone else. Make sure it is driven purely by empathy, stepping completely outside your own ego.
And then just observe.
Exactly. Watch for that lightning bolt of bliss it creates. Because if the heart is the only vehicle that can reach those luminous heights, it's those tiny stones laid one by one that build the stairway up. Keep building.